We have everybody, yeah, but okay. I guess it's fine. Most people are here. All right. Okay, so let's get started. Thanks everyone for coming. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Karola Marky, who is visiting us from Ruhr-University Bochum, where she's leading the Digital Sovereignty Group. And she's joined recently the CASA Excellence Cluster. Right? And yeah, her main research areas are human factors in cybersecurity and privacy, and she's particularly focusing on digital sovereignty. And today she will be talking about unique security and user experience challenges of internet voting. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Little disclaimer, Philip already said it, like my research is quite broad on digital sovereignty, different security and privacy topics online. But I think especially like for security researchers, internet voting, which is kind of the holy grail of security, some people tend to say, is a little bit more interesting, which is why I focused this talk on like the past 10 years of internet voting research. Yeah, let's skip this slide about me. Yeah, there's like my contact information. I put it again on the last slide because yeah, Philip introduced me so nicely. So to give you like a little bit of an overview, we will talk a little bit about like election principles and voting technology, starting with paper actually, depending if you have some questions and so just raise your hand, let me know. How are we handling questions like from the online audience? Okay, perfect. So if there is some question online, just let me know. Zoom is kind of stealing me focus. Then we will talk, and this is like the most part of the talk, about online voting, about like some requirements and about some specific investigations on human factors that I did in different labs and universities. And during that, we will also talk a bit like on challenges on the implementation level and societal aspects, and finally giving like a little bit of a hint of an answer to the question whether we should vote online right now, because there's like a big demand, especially that came, during the COVID-19 pandemic, or should we, rather not do it? So first of election basics, I think all of you know the 5 voting principles. Many countries have them in their law. When we come to the law stuff, I'm mainly considering Germany as a use case, but the UK, for instance, is quite similar. So we have equal elections, everyone should have an equal share of votes, so there should not be like one person that can cast 2 votes and the others only 1. It should be universal, so no one should be disenfranchised, it should be free, no one should be pressured or coerced, it should be direct. So voting by proxy is something that is not possible in Germany. Some countries for limited use cases allow that, like France, and it should be secret. And this is one of the most important democratic principles, because then you can freely express your will. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, there was like a 6th principle that said that the elections should be public in a way that every voter and any observer wants to has to be able to comprehend all essential steps of the voting process without having expert knowledge. And you will see in this talk, this will be getting challenging, especially, in cryptographically verifiable voting. So keep these 5, 6 principles in mind when we talk about the voting technology. So the earliest voting technology that we know of are paper ballots. Of course, there were like way earlier ones where you wrote it like on a piece of stone or so, but I think I don't have to cover that because we don't have that in our daily lives anymore. So those are 2 examples for Germany. The left one is for the City Council of Frankfurt, where you can cast 96 votes, special rules. So you can give some candidates like up to 3 votes, and then you can cross off some candidates, really complicated. The second one is the one for the German Bundestag, where you on the left vote for like a person of a party, and on the right you cast a vote for the party. The two of them have in common that you have kind of a candidate list, and then you make a cross or a mark or whatever next to your candidate. I think it's similar in the UK. This is the kind of ballot that most of us know pretty well. The second one that is also quite frequently used as a write-in ballot. The left example is from the US. It's kind of interesting because in the write-in you can add someone, and as you see here, it could be Mickey Mouse as well, could be anyone. The right one is from Estonia, and they use a kind of code voting. So their ballot is like a postcard size, and in the ballot voting booth, they have like a list of numbers, and here the 1337 would be for the one candidate. So it's just a little bit to write, and they are not allowed to write in any new options. Throughout the talk, I will use this overview. It's interesting because you have other smileys on your laptop than I do. So to talk a little bit about like the advantages and the disadvantages of the different technologies. So paper, for the most, is like quite easy to understand. We know it from our daily lives. There's a lot of experience that people have. It's easy to do that in school, to learn it. You just make a cross next to a person. But it's incredibly inefficient. So for instance, in Germany, we have one ballot box for 1,000 voters. To tally that votes, it takes between 3 and 6 hours. And even then, you know, after that, we can't announce a final result, because all the paper results have to be brought to a central place. They have to verify it again. So it can take up to 2 weeks until we have a final result for like a Bundestag election in Germany. Some positive aspect is that we have an audit trail. That means we have some evidence on each individual vote. If there's some problem, we can just simply count the paper ballots again. And in most countries, paper ballots are archived for a certain amount of time exactly for that purpose. So, you know, the Bundestag election was like 2 years ago. If there was some issue with that, we could still dig out the paper ballots and just recount it. Something that isn't possible with paper ballots, like if you use them in a polling station, is absentee voting. So here you can just use the paper ballot and postal mail it, but you need, in most countries, it's like a special process. In terms of verifiability, yeah, you can verify, you know, that you marked cross correctly. You can verify that you inserted it into the ballot box, but then, and that's why I put the snail again, it's going to be challenging for you because you have to stand next to the ballot box until the tallying process. In most countries, there's like a minute that you can't verify because you have to go out and then you come back in again. It's just, you know, to say like voting has stopped. Everyone leaves for a second and then they have to come back in again. And then you look, you know, at the tallying process. Of course, you can't identify your vote because in many countries it's forbidden to do that, like to have like some individual marks, and it would be invalid. So put the snail because it kind of works, but it's also kind of challenging. It stole my focus again. So now let's really talk about technology, early voting technology that was used. The first ones that was really funny were like lever machines. So you have the names. So you see, it's like this pixel image. That was the only one that I could get from it. You have the names of the parties and you pull the lever, and in the back, you have this little counter. Keep in your mind the following questions. What might go wrong now in the process? And yeah, it's kind of funny. So yeah, in the end, it's easy. You just check the counters in the back and say, oh yeah, that party had that many votes and so on. Second kind of lever machine is this one. It's kind of interesting. So you have that curtain, you close the curtain, and that activates the machine. I couldn't find proper documentation on that one. So if anyone knows how it works, I'm thrilled to know about it. However, something I could found quite in depth is that these kind of levers got stuck. So there were also counters in the back, but you know, those get stuck, and this was a problem. So when we talk about lever machines, you know, there's like an issue on understandability. The efficiency is a little bit better in terms of tallying, because you just need to add the different counters together from different lever machines, but it's like not the fastest option that you could have. Audit is not really possible. Some people say they have like seals in the lever machines, but yeah, this is not really working because if it got stuck, you don't know, did it like eat up 10 votes or not? Absentee voting here, again, not possible. There has to be another option here, not even the same ballot design can be used. And I guess I don't have to explain that there's not any kind of verifiability. The next one is something I found like really, yeah.
So one quick question on the first lever machine is, could a person who like uses that, they could put multiple times?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also like one kind of the problems here. I mean, something that is done when you tally paper ballots as well is that we check the like 10 voters participated and we have 10 votes. So you would see that there is some kind of issue, but you can't trace the error. You don't know where it was. Yeah. There are some places like this one. This is one thing that I know is that you close the curtain, you can have one vote and you open the curtain and then it's kind of reset. So this is okay, but you don't know whether this vote has been, you know, properly counted, has the voter interacted with it and so on. So this one is some example I really like. This is from the November 7, 2000 election, where we had this epic race from George W. Bush against Al Gore. So the idea was here to have something easy for the voters, but then we have some kind of technology that helps us in the tallying process. So how does this one work here? So this is like a booklet, and then you have like one of these really old punch cards that some of you might have known from programming. I've never used it myself. My mom told me about it. When you want to vote for George W. Bush here, you punch a hole with some kind of stick into the number 3 and so on. And this was particularly interesting because here, the way it was built was that it's not foul-proof. So you could put in like the punch card and the alignment was not 100% clear. So it could be that you wanted to vote for George W. Bush, but then the card was kind of wrong. And then you voted for Al Gore or vice versa. And this was like a nightmare. But what made it the real nightmare in this very election was this here. So the punching didn't always entirely go through. So we learned all kinds of interesting names for that, like the hanging chat or the pregnant chat. So the hanging ones are those, you know, where you have like not entirely punched through, but at least it's like in some places it hangs away. But for the pregnant ones, it's still connected on all sides to the paper. And here you see one of these punch cards taken out, and people that like got really confused about it. And luckily, this technology got like abandoned completely, at least. So when we look at punch cards in terms of understandability, it was designed to be easy, but in fact, it's not. When you want to tally it, it's okay-ish again, because you just take the punch card, you put it into a machine which tallies it automatically. We don't really have an audit trail, although it claims there is, but you know, we can't judge whether there is like the chat or not. It's impossible. Same issue with absentee voting, and here the voters can again not verify. So of course, if they are expert, they can take out the punch card and have a look, but we can't really ask voters to do that. So what was the next step here? The idea was again to keep the experience for the voters pretty much the same. Maybe some of you know this from like standardized tests like the SAT in the US. And if you want to vote like for this person, you would really like mark it and have it like in a, just fill the circle. This one can then be taken into an optical ballot scanner. So you verify that it's okay, and then the scanner tallies that for you. And in my opinion, this is the state of the art right now. This is like the best what we can do. However, we don't need this SA-like ballot designs anymore because now we have AI and stuff. So we can just have like the ballots, like the one from Germany I showed you in the beginning. and just have a normal scanner for that. And that works. For instance, Latvia is currently using that. So for this one, in terms of understandability, it's really easy because the experience for the vote, no paper voting isn't changed that much. Efficiency also got a lot better because we can have like this technology assistant tallying. We have an audit trail like before. So in case there's some issue with the machine, we can just tally the ballots. And here is something, it's called risk limiting audit. So we take a random subset of the ballots and tally them by hand, check if that result from the paper ballot statistically matches overall result. If yes, fine. If not, we use the paper ballots as a backup. Absentee voting, still the same issue. And in terms of verifiability, it's really nice. And as I said earlier, if someone would ask me to recommend something, that is the one that I would recommend right now. Yeah.
For absentee voting here, can they put it in the same scanner, or they have to use an entirely different tallying as well?
They can just use the same ballot, send it by postal mail, and then the people responsible for that can tally it that way. Yeah. And this is also what I would recommend, because you don't want to have any kind of error that you can't control based on different ballot designs. So I think it's best if you do that. Next one is called direct recording electronics, short DRE. Those are like computers used in polling stations, mostly touchscreen devices. They are all kinds of designs. It's interesting when you look at talks from security researchers, because they have like funny passwords like A, B, C, D, E, F. And so running Windows 98. Those are a nightmare in terms of verifiability. And if you look for, you probably know Alex Haldeman. He gave an amazing talk on the German Chaos Communication Congress. I highly recommend that, just showing all the different problems for security by security. But I guess I don't have to explain that one to you. Something interesting here also is that on the touchscreen device, like when you look in early studies of that in Japan, like elderly people really like that, because in Japan you have write-in ballots, and when you get older, it's more difficult to write. However, when you have like a ballot where you have many candidates, it's really difficult to display all the candidates like equally. So in terms of fairness, so you would need like a huge one, and this is this is a typical size where the voting booth is like kind of also around it. So DREs in terms of understandability here, I haven't said that one, but this was something challenging. So there is like a picture in the news from a woman that kind of punched that one because she got so frustrated about it. In terms of efficiency, it's the same like the ballot scanners before. We have like a digital result. So here it's quite common that they just print it out on a piece of paper, then you manually add it together. I put on the audit trail and verifiability here kind of half, because you can have this one as a combination with the optical scanner. So you can use it for ballot marking. It prints out a piece of paper. I look at it as a voter and say, oh yeah, that matches my vote, fine. And then it gets scanned on another machine. That would be okay. But this is mostly not done because it's the tallied digital way. If it's tallied in a digital way, we can't do the risk limiting audit. We don't know if there's any issue in the machine. And there was also one report also from Alex Haldeman from the US last year that showed that there was like a ballot design error because there was some changes like last minute before the election, but not all the machines were properly updated. So this is a bit complicated. And of course, absentee voting, same as before. So when we looked at this 6 principles from elections earlier, now in 2014, there was an effort made to translate this now into a digital system. And this is interesting because voting technology is much older than that. So why haven't we done this before? Because we kind of want to know that our technology matches like the legal criteria. So how does it work? This was for the use case of Germany. So we have our 6 principles. Then they are translated together with like experts and lawyers into legal criteria. And here you see self-determination, which I found interesting because, it's like my main research area and also apparently a legal requirement. Then you have like another step. Oh, sorry, I mixed this one up. So first you have the legal requirements, then you have this legal criteria. And up to that, this process is called CORA. This is something that people, basically lawyers, do. I don't really know how it works. But we need this legal criteria then to, in a collaborative process, have technical requirements. And those are 14 requirements, mostly in the connection with security for an online voting system. I refer to the work of Stefan Neumann. Here he in-depth describes this process, and it was really interesting to read. And in the remainder of this talk, when we specifically focus on online voting, we will look at some of them. Something also that I should say here, like the anonymity requirement here is also something that's like really specific to certain countries. In other countries, it doesn't matter. So in Germany, it's not allowed to know whether you participated in an election or not. But there are other countries where like voting is mandatory, and then it doesn't matter anymore. I've even heard that in the UK, they have some ballots where you have like a number on it, and they record which voter had which ballot. So theoretically, it's even possible to break vote secrecy, but it's not part of the protocol.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's there because the second person who shows up and says that they are you at the elections post, and then go back and fill out the function.
Thanks for that. And I found this like, interesting because we complain a lot about like traceability, and this is like the voting system in a country that already allows that kind of thing. So now, let's talk about like internet voting and talk a bit about the challenges that I mentioned earlier. So first of all, online voting to many people sounds incredibly easy. You're a voter, you use some kind of device, could be this laptop or the smartphone. Cast a vote, you send it to a server where it is stored, and then sometime after the election, you announce the result. And many people I'm talking to that are like not from the security community are asking me, why aren't we just doing that? I've participated in so many surveys online, why can't we vote? Yeah, I mean, the reason is this sounds incredibly easy, and this is the naive way of doing it, but there's a lot that can go wrong into the process, and let's have a look at it. First, I put this slide also to show you how few countries are actually doing online voting. So you see that there was some, like the little country like up in North Europe, Estonia does it for quite a while. Interestingly, Russia does it. I'm not sure if we want to trust that. But mainly, in the world, it's not commonly used. Like even if many people ask for that, but the data here, like it's difficult to actually get information on that, is also a little bit older. So right now it's mainly Estonia, Armenia for a specific subset of people like diplomats living abroad, Russia, and Switzerland, who stopped it in 2019 after a public penetration test, but currently they are doing like a redesign and everything with a bunch of experts and having like monthly seminars on what is the current progress of the system. They've also had this bounty hunting thing. Check their website if you're interested. You can win a lot of money. So going back to the requirements earlier, let's talk a bit about like eligibility, which means like only voters that are allowed to participate in the election should be able to vote, and secrecy. Those are two conflicting requirements, On the one hand, we need to know the identity of the voters to make sure that they are eligible. On the other hand, we are not allowed to know how they voted. And this is really, really difficult, and also difficult to observe, to make sure, like from the public, because we also want to, have observers that make sure our elections are fair and all right. In online voting, we use encryption to ensure secrecy. We have mixed-net shuffles again, like another layer of secrecy to make sure that there's no connection between a vote and an IP address. We have a separation of duty because then, some parties have to collaborate to break vote secrecy. And in the end, we also have like audit trails to make sure like everything was all right, no vote was lost, and so on. For us, those are like mechanisms that work. But there's a lot that can go wrong. So there might be like a virus on my computer that could just change my voting intention or not send the vote and I wouldn't even know about it. There might be some issue during transmission, someone, changing the vote or stopping it. There might be someone hacking the server. Interestingly, when I ask participants in studies what they fear in online voting, it's always this like generic hacker. Don't know, like when we ask them who they are, it's just like hackers. Yeah.
Who wants to parents' basements?
Yeah, that's the ones, or then it's the Russians. So then when you ask, that is interesting because this is like this generic fear of hackers. And when we have such kind of issues, of course, we can't trust our result any longer. And if you look at some elections, 1% of the votes that are manipulated can already flip an entire election. So attacks can impact the integrity of our result. But now let's for a minute assume the world would be perfect and easy, there would be no attackers. Then there might still be problems, there might be some issue in my computer, or connection lost or whatever. The German Telekom digging a hole, or Deutsche Bahn would just, somehow manage to attack Lufthansa. Something that could happen, there would be some malfunction on the server. And those are complex systems. And the more complex the system gets, we can't really make sure that nothing like that's going to happen. So we might not be able to trust our result. And that means the infrastructure that we are using, because the internet is unreliable in a way, and the voter devices also, because we can't really control it, also impacts integrity. And finally, we have the voters' view here, because the systems, like even for us, it's quite complex systems. So for them, it's like a black box, and they might say, yeah, where is my vote? Even if something was like completely fine, or they thought everything is fine. So even like the voters and their perspectives themselves like impact integrity here. So here is a bit difficult to say on how the internet performs here. So on the one hand, we can have great understandability, like the easy, naive one I told you earlier. Here's like the best efficiency, because we, like in Estonia, we tallied 100,000 votes in 10 minutes. You don't really have an audit trail because, yeah, people claim server logs are audit trails. I don't. You have absentee voting because you can connect from any place with internet access. And either you have like a really complicated cryptographic protocol, and then the understandability gets complicated and you have verifiability, or it's like the super easy naive case and you don't have it. And in the remainder, we will talk a little bit more about like individual verifiability now and how it interferes with secrecy. And I think this is like the most interesting part in voting research stuff. So what is individual verifiability? If there's now stuff coming where you all know a lot about, just let me know, then I can brush over it a little bit. So the idea is, I'm a voter, I want to vote for something green. I use my system, I send it to the ballot box, and it's stored there. But there might be some problem flipping my green to red. Also, the vote in the ballot box is flipped. And individual verifiability equips me with some tools to compare the vote in the ballot box to the one I just had before. I don't know, the animation is broken, so the green one should right next to the one, and then we see, okay, green obviously is not red, there's some problem. And here you also see another issue, because only voters can do that, because I can't tell Philip, I voted for green, please check my vote, because that's like not allowed. So here we can't really get the voter out of the voting protocol. In this also called end-to-end verifiability, here we have 3 properties. The first one is cast as intended. That means the cast vote, so the one that is inevitable sent to the server, corresponds to my intention, what I want to vote for. Then we have that the record vote, so the one in the electronic ballot box, matches the vote that I cast, so there was no issue during transmission. And finally, all recorded votes are correctly included in the tally. And typically, most protocols that allow individual verifiability allow the first 2 properties. We did a categorization of individual verifiable protocols in the literature. There we looked at the voters' perspective. So what do voters have to do? And also, when do they have to do within the electoral process? And Here we came up with these 4, and I will give you like a quick overview of the 4. Interestingly, I just said, you know, we can't really get the voter out of the process, but there is one way where you can use like zero knowledge proofs and pre-shared secrets, which fundamentally changes the voting process and makes it like really, really complicated. But then you don't have to verify any longer. Then anyone can verify for me. So this is like the secret number 5, but we've kept it like, you know, hidden from the studies because we can't really compare it, because voting is so extremely different from the other ones where you just make your mark, that we thought it's better not to do it. But yeah, I recommend the paper. It's really interesting to read. So audit cast is historically one of the first ones based on the Bannerload challenge. You maybe have heard it. It's one of these cut and choose protocols. So you vote, your voting machine encrypts your vote. Then it hashes your vote. This in the original protocol, the 42 symbol smart ballot tracker, what it was called. Once you have that one recorded, like written down or remembered, if you can, you have to make a decision. So you can either audit the vote or you cast it. When you audit it, the voting option and the randomness value to encrypt the vote are sent to like another software that independently like re-encrypts and calculates the hash. And then you, if both match, you see, yeah, everything was all right. But then, you know, the voting option and the randomness value get sent to another party, which could later on be used to break vote privacy. So if you audit it here, you have to go back, do that ideally a random number of times, you know, until you trust the system, and then you cast your vote. And your smart ballot tracker here is also then posted on like a publicly available website where you compare it, because there are 2 places where software could attack. It's once when the vote is prepared for the first time, when you record the tracker, but once you send the vote, it could still, you know, just encrypt like another vote. So this is like the probabilistic scheme. We did a study here. Yeah, of course. And if they don't match, you know, voter can like trigger an alarm or do whatever. Mostly like in Switzerland, it's calling a hotline. In Estonia, it's just voting again. You can just update your vote. So here we tried everything in the interface, improved instructions to see like, can we somehow help voters voting with this? In the first one, this is the Helios voting system. Maybe some of you know. They get all the cryptographic information, they copy paste it to the verifier. In the second one, they choose like an institute, and this is like a HTTPS request. And in the third one, they have like a QR code that they scan. We investigated as a lab study with 95 participants. Most people were somehow able to verify. But even though, you know, the app was perceived as most usable, participants said, yeah, I verified twice and then I cast a vote, which kind of defeats security, because then an attacker knows after the second verification, this is like, you know, most likely the place when the person cast the vote. When we explained to them like what this is for, they said like, doesn't make any sense to verify at all. So because of the split here, participants saw that verification is kind of redundant, so no one ever has to do it. So that kind of rules out that protocol for any kind of election. And interestingly, the IACR uses it. And if you ask members of the IACR, have you verified? Yeah, I'm glad. So in, like most of my talks, one person like you is there and they tell me exactly that. So they use Helios like the first interface I showed you. And if not even the experts are motivated to verify here, yeah, you can make your own conclusion. So we also did another evaluation where we did a lab study with 100 people evaluating like the 4 different classes against each other that I explained earlier to you. Here we had like a deliberate manipulation where we just flipped some votes randomly, and detection rate is something that we call like the share of reported manipulations, because here we kind of wanted to know, is this really effective? Are people verifying and are they finding errors? When we look at audit or cast, 28% of the errors were found. This is like ridiculously low. half participants, even when we like tried afterward again and again and again, they didn't understand the concept at all. And again, like I said earlier, they considered verification redundant. And for me, this is like, unfortunately, you know, this protocol is dead. You can't really use it. So let's look at another alternative. What about verification devices? This is something used in Estonia since 2015. So Estonia, this little country in the Baltics, has internet voting for quite a while. Also, a large share of the votes, even more now during the pandemic, is cast online, but they continuously improve. That's why they also have a mixed net shuffle now. So how does it work? You vote, you send your vote to the server, you get this QR code, you scan the QR code with your mobile device. The QR code has the randomness where your ballot was encrypted and some kind of hash value to identify your encrypted vote in the server. The app downloads it, uses the randomness to encrypt all possible candidates on the list. And then it shows you, this was the candidate that matched the encrypted vote. Is it yours? So because we can't, you know, decrypt votes and have like the secret key of the election embedded in some apps. And it's an easy process. What do you do if something's wrong? You just vote again, or you call the authorities, but you can update your vote even with a paper vote in a specific amount of time. So you can, they have like advanced voting, which is online voting. Then they have 2 days where you can go to a polling station and overwrite your vote. And then they have the voting Sunday. And then you can't vote anymore as an online voter. So if you go to the polling station, it does work.
I think also in Switzerland for remote votes, there is like a specific time before the actual voting, right? So they can send the votes.
Yeah, this is also like postal voting. So these other alternative voting channels are mostly before the elections, like a little bit earlier. Here, when we look about the detection rate, it was 64. We know from a log analysis of the Estonian system that 4% of voters verify in real elections. Voting and verification took on average 3 minutes, which is like incredibly fast. And a little bit of a disadvantage is it generates a receipt. So when you come to me and ask, Caro, how did you vote? I just show you. But it's only for 30 minutes. So you could, you know, theoretically, but it doesn't really rule out coercion. It's just a way to mitigate it. Tracking data was something where that was interesting. It was from Peter Ryan from the University of Luxembourg, where you can also do universal verifiability. So the first 2 ones were just, you know, until like the tally, but this one also verifies that your vote is correctly included in the tally. You vote, everything gets tallied, you get like a ballot tracker. This is like when you order a parcel from Amazon. And then in the end, all votes are published in clear text next to the ballot tracker. You check that next to your tracker is your vote. You can also recount all votes and so. Here, we did 2 studies. This one was kind of interesting, where we let people vote and confronted them with the system and let them draw their mental models. And we had 4 types, and you see that people had all kinds of understandings, like what that tracker might be, where it is, and struggled a little bit because you see, like the first 2 mental models were basically just the items that we told them. So we gave them like little stickers to facilitate that. So people had not a clue on what could that be. They found 84% of the manipulated votes understood quite well those who had it like in detail what happened, but they were kind of scared that now secrecy is broken because there's like this tracker that could somehow be linked to the identity, similar to the one Stephen just explained, like in the UK system. And finally, and this is like the conclusion of this talk, let's talk a bit about code sheets. That's the ones used in Switzerland based on the Neuchâtel voting protocol. Before the election, you get like a code sheet, for instance, via postal mail. It's important that no one knows the content of your code sheet except you. You choose a voting option, then you send it to the voting server and get back a verification code. You look it up on your code sheet and check, does this match like the candidate I wanted to vote for? If yes, because now the vote is just in front basically of the ballot box. It's not inserted yet. So you have to confirm to the server that you verified your vote. And you do that with a confirmation code. You also have it on your code sheet. It's basically like a vote insertion code that you enter. But now it could still be that, the system doesn't insert your vote, which is why the system then answers to you with a finalization code that you again have to compare, and then you know everything is all right. There is like a zillion different protocols, how to compare these codes, how to calculate them, how to generate them. Also several ways how Switzerland does it in different cantons. Here, when we did the study, now that you see the comparison of all, we had the perfect detection rate. All errors were found. Why? I think it's because here verification is part of the voting process. If you don't enter that code, you can't insert your vote. And also we had like some really good guidelines when we designed all kinds of interfaces, and here the guidelines really work well. When we look at like speed, how long does it take to vote? You see that when you use a code sheet, it takes significantly longer than all the other methods, but still it's like within 10 minutes. I think this is kind of okay. And we also measured like subjective efficiency. And here the participants considered it as equally efficient like the other systems also. When we look at understandability, here we had like people explain what they did in different metrics and clustered that in no understanding, partial and complete. And remember that like the code sheet said like the perfect detection rate, but only 60% like kind of understood what these codes and the verification was for. Again, my favorite audit or cast, 48% didn't know at all what they've been doing. And yeah, basically, that concludes my talk. I have 2 more use cases in the backup slides in case someone's interested, but I think this is like a good point where we can go into the Q&A.
Good. Thanks a lot. Yeah, questions.
Yep.
To some extent, this is a possible pass. But when we ever get to some point where we have something that I would say is better than just putting on paper.
This is difficult to say. I typically, for this one, your scrolling is other way around than mine, I just realized. So typically when I get asked this question, I say, people ask me, can we vote online now? Does it work? Can we get over paper? Oh, thank you that you asked it. So I say overall, yeah, we can do it, but we have this kind of, it has to be implemented, tested, can't be distributed overnight. Paper, you kind of can do. We have this human factors issue that also contributes to integrity. We have scalability challenges because you can't really test such a system. And so my answer is no. At the moment, we simply shouldn't do it. And these optical ballot scanners, where you have the combination of like paper and technology, will be better for quite a while. For governmental elections, if you have your club, your university president, so yeah, there you can.
What are your thoughts on blockchain voting?
This is the second question I'm always getting. Don't really get the hype. So we have, when you look at voting systems, we have some parts where it is important to document that data is not altered. Like when I showed you this audit or cast protocol where you have the list of all votes in the publicly available bulletin board, that could be used. So you can do that with a blockchain, but the other ones where you have this, like you can use it where you have coins in wallets. And so it doesn't really help with a lot of the security requirements, makes it complicated, and you have the blockchain overhead still, and you have the trust gap. Like unless you have a fully digital system, like where you have like finance stuff, you know, once someone puts information into the blockchain, you can't really overcome that trust gap.
And have you thought about ways to overcome or to verify that someone is being coerced into voting a certain way? Just because whenever you have the box where you like close the curtains, well, you can still decide on your own how to vote. And if you're voting on your laptop, you can just be like sitting next to someone and making sure that you're voting this one.
Coercion is a big issue. I also had like, you know, some slides, so that's part of like the societal challenges. There is one voting protocol, JCJ Civitas, that tries on a really like strong assumptions and incredible memory of human that no one has, that it's possible. So there the idea is you have like a set of like voting credentials, and there's like, I don't know, X real credentials, and then there are like some fake credentials that you can use. It looks like a real one. And no, you know, let's just assume I know the credentials by heart. I have some other way of like getting them. You stand next to me and I can just vote using like the fake credential. That is one option. There were ideas to put like the credentials on smart cards. So, but then there's always this kind of thing, because if you know that there are 10 credentials, you can just have the person vote 10 times. If you have like a random number of credentials, how should that be? Should voters be able to generate their own credentials? What is if you do it like a minute before voting closes, and then you come to like solutions where you have like the situation from Estonia, and then coercion doesn't scale anymore, because yeah, you can coerce me, but one vote's probably not going to change it.
Could you say a bit more about the receipts?
It's kind of a receipt. So when I verify on my phone for, I vote, and then I can verify for 30 minutes. And this 30 minutes, I kind of have a receipt. And then people say, you know, I got coerced, I verify, I have vote updating, I vote again. But what is if I vote like a minute before online voting closes? And then you would have to go like to the polling station.
Yeah, and I was just wanted to say that you can see it go on the last day and actually this one paper I would understand. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So you can also got the as you can really vote multiple times, and that's why we had to set our private elections on Sunday. So we will decryption process took time because they had to take away from these online votes compared to if you had also come to the station and actually use them and pay to voting, and then kind of stays. So this takes a very time, that's behind the points and but yeah, so somebody says that you have to go so I mean, it's a problem, of course, we limit this stuff in this. That's not a problem.
I feel something that people also tend to overlook, because in Germany we had like over a third of postal votes in the past, even before the pandemic. And it could be, you know, that I'm just sitting there filling in my ballot and my husband walks and says, bloody hell, how can you vote for party A? And this is like a thing where there's no like active coercion. So no one, you know, but there's like a social pressure. And then I could say, yeah, you're right. No, let's just change it. So this is a problem we already have. And what is interesting, because postal voting is also not verifiable, this is like even more difficult than the polling station, because unless I bring the letter to the office, I don't know whether it gets there. And even if I bring it there, they just like in the city where I'm from, they put it into a box, and I don't know, will those end up? I don't know. And now that we have some years ago, you had to have like a good reason for postal voting. Now it's just, you just can't do that. And since we have that lifted, there are so many people doing it. And I think we already probably have coercion problems and disverifiability issues to a larger degree than we are expecting. And, you know, then again, comparing to just postal voting thing, if someone is like in Japan or wherever, like I postal voted from Glasgow once and once from Japan, and those were situations where I think it's actually okay to do the online stuff because you have a limited amount of voters, and here like the verifiability benefits are so good compared like to the postal voting where you are likely disenfranchised. And I know like from Japan, my letter didn't come in time.
I mean, I online voted by taking a picture of my ballot, emailing it, and then I also simultaneously mailed it in the real.
Once.
Well, no, they come to it only once, but they want to make sure that they can have them if my ballot came.
Oh, so it's like a backup.
Exactly.
I just have an issue with that. And then my got sent back to me.
Oh.
And, I voted multiple times.
You check it on the voter roll for like, so the voter rolls for the state that I'm from, the US, is public, and so like I get spam based on whether I voted in previous elections. So based on the spam, I know I voted.
So there was one question in the chat.
Yeah.
Does anyone else, do you want to read it? And then.
I've been an election observer on many occasions. I've seen many creative and witty ways the traditional and
Probably paper.
paper voting system can be manipulated at various stages. This is especially prevalent in countries with a history of corruption, but when considering the many risks associated with e-voting, in your opinion, is the risk of shifting to e-voting worth it in such countries? Would it make any difference in terms of transparency, even with the risks from narrow?
I think this is difficult to say. I mean, you've also been voting observer, and there are research papers on like African elections where they had like some technology, but that was more in like the eligibility part, like proving the identity of someone where it actually improved something. And here I cannot really say, because it's like a situation in the country is like a complex ecosystem, and we know that Russia has been doing online voting and that was highly critical. So I think if you have like a verifiable system where you do all the stuff, open source code testing. I mean, Switzerland is an incredibly good example of like really doing that. Follow everything, then it might improve the situation. But I would assume that in such a country, that wouldn't be the way they would approach that. It would be more like, you know, some kind of closed source system and other things.
Some random company in some other country.
Yeah. So I kind of doubt that they would follow like a good state-of-the-art process. So I would say it would probably make it even worse.
When these single banker Marky needs to be correct, at least this one is published.
Yeah, there are many like great works, like from like even older ones from the 80s, where people that were like really skeptical. But on the other hand, so the author from Alice in Wonderland under another name published in 1800 something a creative paper on like liquid democracy and proxy voting, where you see it's like a creative way of how technology could actually improve the idea. So I think there are like both opinions present for quite a while, but I think as security community, we should like push for this high standards that are really difficult to keep, as we see in Switzerland. And another good thing is like Switzerland has the principle security before speed. So they have it in the law that only a certain share of the electorate is allowed to use online voting unless they have specific security requirements. And so far, the share was like quite low because they haven't had the requirements fulfilled. And I think that's a good thing. But yeah, even 23 years later, we still can't really do it.
So how widely?
I would like to know the question for email votes.
And you know, also I think voting is like some kind of a self-expression, and we cannot unify the invalid votes. You know, people can write something whenever they want, or they can just vote for two parties and or two elected president candidates, and their votes can be invalid. In e-voting, you see any this kind of like more, as far as I understand, full representation is more focusing on how we can count the votes. But if you know, can be more like freedom of expression thing, you know, anonymously, people will feel more confident because they are fully anonymous and they do what they want within this ballot box. But as far as I understand, this technology doesn't allow this kind of creative invalid vote.
It kind of depends. So the ballot design that you put into the electronic system should fit the legislation. And for instance, you know, in Germany, it has to be possible to cast an invalid vote. And so the idea here is that you have the candidate list, and the last option is, I want to cast an invalid vote. That's also how we did it in our studies. So it's an explicit voting option. And if you don't click anything, it's also an invalid vote.
You can write something, you know, like some criticism on the paper thing, or you can just do whatever you want. At least on TOCHI, and you can't bring your phone, but you can take some pens and write whatever you want and freely express yourself. Rather than just invalid votes. There is no secret of saying invalid votes, but you can be very creative to vote in a very invalid way, but creative way. That's why I want to ask.
Yeah,
I think it limits, technology limits to some extent this aspect of voting.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can only say invalid or not. It's like a binary thing, unless you know, in this like write in ballots, of course, you could also write something, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, in some relation by an example, there's normally containers or balance like that, where someone's written something. And though it is considered invalid, but they are seen by all the agents of the departments. And the most creative one is someone who eats invalid. It's an interesting moment, because now that balance is falls into one. So the extra people are to see.
But you know, on the other hand, I had this like really huge ballot in the beginning. So you know, when you go, I mean, yeah, I didn't want to continue on eating. It was more that when we have this like complicated elections, 5% of the votes are invalid. This is statistically higher compared to the other elections in Germany. So there are probably quite a few invalid votes, even if the people didn't want to make it invalid. So this is like, even, you know, if it's limited, that you have like a creative kind of invalid vote, it kind of prevents accidental invalid votes. And this is like really important because that's like really disenfranchises people. And but on the other hand, like in Germany, you can also vote like in a creative way. So if you just write the name of the party in big letters over it, it's still valid.
Yeah, so UK rules are very flexible as long as you cannot be identified if your intention is clear.
Yeah. And then if you write like a bloody name of the party, it's no longer valid because you don't know, you know, if this was like a voting decision or if it's just a curse of the party.
Right. So how have you used is this combination between paper voting plus scanners that you mentioned before?
I have this like overview. I can also send you the link on the more like hopefully more up to date one. I just realized that I haven't updated it since last year. That was in the US used quite a lot. There was also a time actually when like some voting computers were used in Germany until this famous 2008 Bundesverfassungsgericht thingy. But this is way more than we would think, and all kinds of things like touch screen and stuff. Yeah, but I don't have exact numbers. Sorry.
UK had a training. It was administrative. But they basically tried all the combinations, everything, scanning. So what I was observing was scanning, and it was slower, more expensive, and this one is always interesting. Also, we written the visions, and it failed. And we're rewriting the chemistry programs as the information Wow.
So basically everything that is purple and green.
Okay.
Mostly, except for Estonia, because that is like an online one.
Yeah, there was also like a big scandal a few years ago in Germany as far as Windows battalion. Right, there's some stuff with
That was the stupidest thing ever. Yeah, that was so. Even if there is no technology that voters directly interact with, of course, we still have kind of technology in the systems, because you have like phones to call the authorities. We actually got like a phone, and then there was one software that was used to get like votes from different like constituencies and stuff and combine it. That was the one, and that was there's some hackers like reverse engineer it. You should. It's also, I guess, a talk on case communication. Compressed English. Watch it. I just can't. You can't make that stuff up. How ridiculously insecure that one was. Like an old FTP one with a hard-coded password in the code. They reverse engineered that, and then they could also stuff in those, change results and everything.
I think they even provided like free patch on GitHub, right? Because like I think the manufacturer was not willing to, or was not.
It was like an manufacturer, and they sold it actually.
Yeah.
It was like written in Delphi or whatever.
Yeah. And then the CCC folks, like, as a public service, like publish a patch on GitHub. So yeah, please.
And everyone who had the software, there was, because it was hard coded, had also access to the FTP software. That was also like a thing. And they then showed how long ago it was developed. And this is like a great example. So even if a country doesn't allow e-voting for their voters, of course, the poll workers and so they do use something, and this could also be a problem.
Yeah. Right. Any last question or comments? Okay, then I would say let's thank Karola again. Yeah.